It's a different time, but sure, it's good enough. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Rain Race Podcast. Episode 43, 42, something like that, I think. I am joined, as always, alongside Kyle Cuthbertson.
What's up?
Coming, Kyle, I'm gonna have you explain your trip to Barber, and mainly what I mean by that is your trip home from Barber and how that went. But I think it's safe to assume that I got more rest this weekend than you did. So
This is the Tired Rain Race
no,
podcast.
I'm feeling fired up. I'm feeling good. It was a Monday. I got it off from school. Nice holiday
Yay.
here. But why don't you explain your side of the story here on the past 24 hours in your world?
Well, 24 hours ago, I was in Alabama. 24 hours ago. Keep in mind, it's 8 p.m. Eastern, which would have been 7 p.m. Central, which doesn't help. And then at 3 a.m. Eastern time, I was in Indianapolis. And then 6:30 a.m. I was at home in Ohio. So I rode down to Barber with my buddy Steve, and then so I drove to Indiana, and then we went from there to Barber, and then from Barber back to Indiana, and then back home. And I had to be at work today, so it wasn't like I could just sleep in. I did get some rest on the way to Indianapolis, obviously, or else I wouldn't have been able to go all through the night. Mind you, it was still difficult driving overnight like that, but I got home when the sun was rising, and I guess you couldn't call it sleep, but I took like a nap with the sun out this morning for about 3 hours before I went to work. So it's been a day. I'm pretty tired, but this is also my only night at home this week. I have some other stuff that I'm working on this week in like an hour away from home. So this is my only night of the week at home. So it's not like I can go back to sleep. I have stuff to do.
Yep. Also, I do want to quickly point out that the podcast, you may have noticed, probably have noticed by now that it's been moved up an hour. Um, I have been considering moving the podcast up from its previous 9 p.m. Eastern time permanently. I just didn't know how far up I wanted to move it. I think 8 o'clock's going to be the time for now. Now, that's still like 1 o'clock in the morning for those off Greenwich Mean Time, so like the UK. But that's what we're going to work with for now. So potentially over the summer, though, when my schedule's a little bit more freed up, I'll move it up even more if that'll increase our viewership. But for now, I want to say hello, Taris. Thank you for tuning in again. And you immediately pointed out, which I was going to point out later in the episode, I asked last episode which lap the first caution would be on, and congrats to the one of you who said lap 1. That was me. Sixth sense kicked in again, and I think I'm getting pretty good at that stuff. Totally didn't pull a number out of my ass, but yeah, let's talk about that. First lap of IndyCar at Barber, first lap of the season, and we get a pretty big pile up going into turn number 3. I think technically it is the hairpin turn. Kyle, do you want to walk through that one? First off, before you do that, I want to preface here that unfortunately I was caught at work during the entire race, so I caught the last 2 laps of it. So I actually haven't seen a majority of the race. I try to go back and watch the NBC highlights on YouTube, but Kyle, I think, is going to be the main guy for walking through what happened in the IndyCar race, and then hopefully I can carry a bit more when we talk about the F1 race at Imola. But Kyle, first lap, going into the hairpin, actually further back on the straightaway, even before they got to the actual turn, we got a pile up taking a couple cars out. Why don't you talk about that?
It was more like the corners of Barber are weird there because you have the left-hand turn 1, and I guess that next right-hander could be considered 2 corners, but basically
Yeah,
the uphill right-hander, really fast, where the car gets light. Newgarden just lost it, which is really weird of Newgarden. You don't expect that. And he was about 6th, I want to say 7th, somewhere in the top 10, which, you spin there. Barber's not a very wide track, and so he got T-boned by Colton Herta, which then spun Newgarden into Ryan Hunter-Ray, and then Chilton and Rosenquist went to the right to avoid him, and Rosenquist ramped over Chilton, uh, went a little airborne, did a wheelie, and then there were some other guys. Hinchcliffe just went straight left to the grass, but he had a little bit more room. Jimmy Johnson slammed on the brakes, spun and not it, like half spun impressively and avoided it. Um, is there anyone else that got into that? Actually, into it? Graham Rahal was behind it. I think Kellett had an impressive. There basically everyone uh, behind Newgarden either had a close call or just nicked it. I mean, so yeah, right off the bat in turn number 3 or 4, we can't really come up with a decision of what corner number that is. But yeah, right off the bat, on in front of the field, a lot of cars in it. I think the DNF rate out of that was so Newgarden, Hunter-Reay, Rosenquist, and then Chilton actually got back going multiple laps down, and Colton got back going. Actually, Rosenquist got back going, but they didn't really make up many spots. So their day was more or less done. But a lot of good cars on lap one, just taken out, and especially big for Newgarden, who is my championship pick, as well as Colton Herta, who is a lot of people's championship pick. Just turn 3 or 4, lap one, crazy.
And I think the highlight of the weekend for me was not so much what the rookies were doing, but what the not so distant former rookies were doing. I mean, we saw Pato O'Ward put the car on pole, pretty impressive feat for Arrow McLaren. We also saw a first time winner from the Ganassi stable, which is kind of a rare occasion saying that, but Alex Palou pulling off a pretty dominant victory, I'd say.
Oh yeah,
Led the majority of the race and was able to pull off the first win for himself and the first win
now
for
he
that
did
number 10 car in a long time.
he did kind of luck into it, kind of. I mean, it was I wouldn't say luck into it, well, kind of, but the way the strategy worked out, obviously Pato O'Ward, like you said, got the pole, and him and Rossi had a amazing pace from the very beginning. Palou kind of stayed with him, but you could tell that Rossi and Pato were going to be the class of the field right off the bat. Um, but we had that first yellow on lap one, which took up a good chunk of laps because of how much uh, debris there was all over the track. It was a pretty big mess to clean up. And then few laps after that, we had Jimmy Johnson spin, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about Jimmy Johnson later. But how that worked out in the beginning was we had a lot of yellow laps, which at Barber, you're either going to go on a 2-stop strategy or a 3-stop. And so Rossi and Pato apparently had banked before the race on a 3-stop strategy and took less fuel in the car, whereas the rest of the field was able to, keep on going with the 2-stop, and it actually made it even easier for them uh, to hit the number and make and go over and pit at like lap 35. And for reference, it's a 90-lap race, so you put it together: 2 stops, 90 laps, 30, and a little bit after 30, a little bit after 60 is kind of what you want to hit. And so they were pretty golden on the 2-stop strategy, whereas the guys who were dominant, like Pato, got stuck on the 3-stop. So adding an extra pit stop kind of sealed his fate on getting a win. Even though he did actually start charging back at the end, and I think Pato was probably the fastest car in the race, and probably with about 10 more laps would have had him. But yeah, I mean, Palou did kind of luck into that. He was really fast in qualifying, really fast in practice all throughout the weekend. And if the strategies had been equal, I think Pato still would have, fought for the win out of Pato and Rossi and Palou. I think Palou still had a shot with equal strategy, but yeah, he did kind of luck into it.
Another strong weekend, I should say strong weekend as well for Will Power. I mean, if you look at Will Power in recent years, we've kind of talked about him being a driver who might be at risk for, almost losing that Penske ride. Finished second, only I think it was how many tenths of a second was it behind Palou? It
Wasn't that
was
far.
certainly
Palou
under
got
a
stuck
second.
into Yeah, Palou ended up behind Connor Daly in traffic at the end of the race, and if it wasn't for fuel saving, because like I said, the 2-stop strategy, I think Power probably would have been able to fight Palou because of the lap traffic, but it did come pretty close at the end.
Yeah, I think Will Power was a strong showing there this weekend. Scott Dixon as well. Scott Dixon, obviously, at the beginning of last season, put on that multi-race win streak.
Hmm.
Didn't get to happen quite from the beginning of this one, finishing third. But yeah, I mean, a strong showing from Pelot and from some of the other newish but not rookie drivers. But then there you have the seasoned veterans, right? Kind of where you would expect them to be. Speaking of seasoned veterans, Sebastian Bourdais, fifth place for AJ Foyt. Now I know Kyle, you brought, was it you or was it Chris in the last episode who brought up Bourdais driving for AJ Foyt potentially being a turnaround driver for that team?
I think both of us said something about that.
Yeah. So definitely a great showing for that team. AJ
He
Foyt Racing.
equaled he equaled what he did at St. Pete last year, which is
Yeah.
something David pointed out to me because I thought it was like so crazy that he finished fifth in the Foyt car, and David pointed out to me at the track, and well, he did it last year when he ran for Foyt at St. Pete last time he ran. So
Hmm.
it's going to be interesting to see if he can keep that up or even do better, because you know a fifth place finish for the Foyt team, on a regular basis would be mega.
Going down the rest of the top 10, you had Rinus VK, who was actually caught up in the first lap pile up. Good
Yeah,
recovery for him to finish sixth. Graham Rahal was seventh. Ericsson eighth. Alexander Rossi ninth. And Romain Grosjean was 10th. And that kind of brings us in nicely to discussing how the three rookies did at their debut race, with the exception of Scott McLaughlin, who, of course, ran at St. Petersburg last year for the finale. Um, I think, Kyle, I know you and I both predicted that McLaughlin was going to be the strongest rookie this season just because you and I were pretty confident of his confidence
yeah,
compared to Grosjean and Jimmy Johnson. And it actually looks like Romain Grosjean was a little bit stronger this weekend. Now, obviously, you can make the argument that he's coming over from a style of cars that's way more similar than what Scott McLaughlin was running. But Romain Grosjean, I think 10th place. First race in IndyCar and first top 10 is nothing to go home disappointed about.
yeah. So Grosjean definitely, I think, is showing the best, just right off the bat pace. Uh, Probably, you know, I think it was probably easy to predict looking back that Grosjean would be the guy that would pick up the quickest out of the three. But I think the weekend that Scott McLaughlin had was honestly pretty perfect for his situation. So, minus the crash at St. Pete, he had that. He's just working his way up, slower. He had that race at St. Pete where he kind of ran in the back and learned it all, uh, and minus the wreck. But this weekend he actually advanced to the second round of qualifying. Now he was 12th, but made it to the second round and he completed the entire race. And he actually, I thought that he had a weird race because I thought in the beginning that he was looking, pretty solid and inside the top 10. And then as the race went on, he kind of started fading back to where he eventually finished, I believe, 15th. So I think he made a step forward this weekend, and I think he probably did exactly what he expected himself to do. And it's honestly kind of what I expected him to do, where make that first step to making it to the second round of qualifying, which is what you need to do, and then get a full race under your belt, and then now he's just got to learn how to keep up the pace, manage the tires and the fuel, and keeping up with a strategy. And because some guys like Graham Rahal, Rinus VK, Sebastian Bourdais, they started in the back and they really just rallied their way to the front together throughout the pit strategy, and it was impressive to watch. And Grosjean was actually running. Grosjean, kind of had the same downfall during the race that McLaughlin did, where he was fifth early on and had the pace. But I think as you change the tire, you change to the different compounded tire. You're trying to hit a fuel number while also being fast. He just got jumped by guys like Rahal and Bourdais and VK, guys who have experience doing it. And I think the more races into the season, I think the quicker they'll get. And yeah, I definitely think Grosjean and McLaughlin are, right around where they need to be right now.
Yeah, McLaughlin pulled off a 14th place finish, actually, so
Oh, one better
one
than I
higher than
thought.
what you were saying. And then
Even better.
rounding out the rookie field, at least, was Jimmy Johnson with that 19th place finish out of 24 cars. Regardless, I think Jimmy Johnson, he might be a little bit hard on himself. Um, but at the end of the day, it's no argument that he is going in there with the least experience in open wheel cars, and for him to even finish his introduction race to IndyCar, I think is an extremely positive thing for him. The season can really only go uphill from here. That's a track he's never raced on, and a car that he's never raced with before. So, you know, despite the fact that it was in the bottom quarter of the field, I think that Jimmy Johnson certainly has something to be proud of going away from that one.
I think
Um,
being at the back of the field was, kind of what he expected.
right.
And I think he had a great weekend minus the spin. I think the spin's the one that he's gonna, think about. Um, because that's really all I needed to do was log laps. And I did notice in person at the very end of the race that the guys that he was around in the closing 20 laps, he wasn't really getting passed by the guys who were around him. Now, he did get passed by the leaders, but so were the guys around him. I think by the end of the race, he started, picking up and learning. And you could kind of notice he was just getting more comfortable as it went on. And the big thing for me, and the big thing I think is to watch with Jimmy this season, and to kind of keep tabs with is it's commitment. Because Jimmy, you almost have to accept that he's going to be at the back of the field this season. Jimmy, I think, knows that he's going to have to accept that. And it's just going to be about commitment, because we know how competitive Jimmy Johnson is, and any race car driver for that matter. Even though you're having fun, and we all know Jimmy's having fun, but being a competitive race car driver and having that fire, you can only sit at the back for so long, and it's just going to be about commitment, logging laps, and how long, until Jimmy, I mean, how long until he steps it up a notch, how much until he decides, hey, it's not working. I mean, that's just going to be, I think, what we have to watch.
Taurus did ask another question. He said, "Do you think the race length should have been 5 or so laps longer to balance out the two and three stop strategies?" Talking about the pit stops.
Mm,
Uh,
I mean, at a track, so you kind of look at it this way. At a track like Barber, obviously there's, not a ton of opportunities for passing. Obviously there's opportunity for passing, but you look at the, other tracks like Mid Ohio, same way, narrow track, not a lot of passing opportunities. So in the way you create, the racing, is you also throw in the strategy aspect, which is determined by the number of laps you run. And Mid Ohio has actually changed the number of laps a couple times throughout the years, messing around with 5 laps less, 5 laps more, just to try and see what they can shake up as far as the strategy goes. And I think Barber, it would have been interesting if it hadn't gone yellow, and you would have seen had if Pato would have actually have been able to just muscle his way past the other guys on the 3 stop, or on the other side, if the 2 stop strategy still would have worked with the extra conservation, because it just so happened. And if it was a couple more laps longer, I don't think it would have happened the way it did, and where someone made their bet on strategy like Pato Award, where they filled the car up to do a 3 stop strategy at the beginning, basically made it so that they couldn't have a plan B on strategy, and it cost them big time. And the rest of the field on the 2 stop strategy, they made the right call. And I mean, without the strategy, the race we would have seen, I mean, it wouldn't have been as. I mean, I know the strategy races for a lot of people aren't as entertaining, but I think without it, it would have just made the race a complete bore instead of the strategy battle we saw.
and then I guess my only question to you is: we've now had a season opener at Barber, and I think I already know the answer to this question. But would you rather? And first of all, I fully expect that St. Pete's going to go back to the opening round. But would you rather have a season opener at St. Petersburg or at Barber for future seasons?
I don't know, because I've never been to a season opener at St. Pete. Well, I have, but not really. And I've never been to a Barber that was the second race of the season. I will say Barber is a great facility. If you ever get the opportunity to go to the uh, Grand Prix of Alabama, I highly recommend you do that, and you go to Bucky's, which is right outside the track, and the Bass Pro Shop's right off the track. for a Midwestern, BFE living boy like me, Alabama is the place to be. That was fun. But I mean, I St. Pete does have that great, vibe about it. And even though it's not the first race of the season this year, I still expect it to be, the same as the season closer last year. It was, it's just like you look at that and it's like that's a great IndyCar race. It's got everything you want. The inner city is beautiful, and lots of great places to go and eat and hang out. The park where the track is and the airfield, the way it's set up is just very neat. The way it's right on the harbor, it's pretty cool. Um, so I mean, either one works honestly for me. I would say I'd probably lean St. Pete, but then starting the season on a natural terrain road course is also pretty cool. So I mean, I don't really have that much of a preference.
And on the topic of St. Petersburg, guess what? It's this coming up weekend, which is great because now hopefully we can say goodbye to this month-long break in between IndyCar's first race and their second, which I guess was gone last year as well, technically with the season starting in June. But previous years you'd have the season opener St. Petersburg, and then you'd have like almost a month or so, maybe 3 weeks until the second race at Barber. Well, if you enjoyed
I
what you
do
saw
think
on
this needs to
track,
stay.
what's that?
You go ahead. I do think that this needs to stay the way it is. I don't know why they keep doing
Yeah.
St. Pete at like the first weekend of March, and then we have Barber in April. It doesn't make any sense.
So if you're a longtime IndyCar fan or you're a brand new one and you liked what you saw on track at Barber, you don't have to wait that long. Next race at St. Petersburg is going to be this weekend, and we're going to be recapping that one for you next week. Hopefully,
Do you have any
next
predictions?
Monday. Um, you put me on the spot
I
for
mean,
that
there's
one. The
a
street races, I said it in the last episode, but St. Petersburg always favors the newer drivers, and I don't know if that's something to do with, um, you know, it was usually the opening race of the season, or if it's just the style of track that St. Petersburg is. But St. Petersburg always puts on some surprise winners. That's where Sebastian Bourdais put down 2 wins for Dale Coyne, and that's where Robert Wickens nearly won in 2018. So I think St. Petersburg's kind of a wild card one, but Palou certainly surprised me. Actually, he didn't surprise me. He really lived up to my expectations. I said
I
in
was
the
about to say that
preview
was
episode.
exactly what you said was going to happen,
I
or
said in
not
the preview
exactly.
episode that in terms of what the rookie class looked like last year, I think he was certainly my favorite. He showed a level of maturity that is not very common for rookies. Rookies are usually more of your Santino Ferrucci type, where they'll be much more aggressive. So certainly I can see him getting another podium finish, possibly even another win, which that'd be fantastic for him. Great mindset starting out the season with 2 wins in a row. Other drivers to look for, though, obviously Will Power is very strong at St. Petersburg. Finished second at Barber. I think that could only be the star for him. I think that Will Power might be a driver we want to look at as a championship contender again, because he has had some rough seasons the past couple of years. So we'll go with that. We'll just say Will Power. I know I said it's a wild card race, but I'll go with Will Power on that one. What about you?
I mean, the great thing about having the first and second race back to back weeks is we have so many like storylines to write off of that we don't have to wait a month to see what will happen. I mean, Newgarden and Herta out on lap one basically have minimum points. By the way, that literally puts their entries outside of the leader circle in the points right away, which is entertaining at the very least. But those two, not only do they have a terrible race one, but those are two guys. Newgarden obviously won the last time we were at St. Pete, that not that long ago. Colton Herta led laps until he made a mistake. He took the lead, and then Will Power, like you said, had a great race one, which I said in my predictions video that I thought Will Power was going to have a good start to the season for once, and if he can in fact keep on this roll, second in the first race, what can he do from here? He'll definitely be a threat for the championship because we know with Will Power he just gets better. But the thing is, Will Power, if you look, he pretty much always wrecks at St. Pete unless he wins. So I mean, you have that to look for, um, and then I mean, you got a couple of guys, those two guys I mentioned that had a terrible race one, looking to bounce back at a track they're good at, and then you got the Oh yeah, and then we have Pelot, with the first time guys. Usually the new guys usually do good at St. Pete. Grosjean uh, did really good in qualifying at Barber. How's he going to do here? Jimmy Johnson, first time on a street course ever. Little less, just like Taurus mentioned in the chat, a little bit less forgiveness at St. Pete with the barriers being so close. And you just have a lot to look forward to. I would say this weekend, I'm going to throw out there a pretty easy one. I think Scott Dixon will get the win. But I mean, Newgarden and Colton Herta, I expect them to bounce back. Pelot should have a good showing. I mean, how about the race that Takuma Sato and Graham Rahal had at Barber? Qualified in the very back. Didn't show a lot of pace all the way through the weekend until Rahal got P1 in warm up and just clawed his way through the field on the strategy. So, I mean, what can they do at St. Pete? They're usually not the greatest, but I mean, the way they were able to bounce back and the comfortability of Rahal this year. That team lost Eddie Jones this year as an engineer, but they seem to be, right in the thick of it still. Sebastian Bourdais has 2 wins in 17 and 18. What can he do with the Foyt car? Finished 5th last year. There's just a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it pretty much all right there. Um, I'd expect St. Petersburg is going to be a little bit more of an interesting race. Not that Barber was boring by any means. I just think that it was more of a traditional, certainly less dramatic race if you don't count lap one than some of the races we've seen at St. Petersburg. So if you're into more drama, I think St. Petersburg might have you covered. We'll have to see on that one. Anyways, I do want to move it on to Formula One, which had a race at Imola. I'm not even going to try saying the entire Grand Prix name because I don't know it, but it was the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola. Second year back at Imola. Last year was the first year of the return. Actually, this year I think Imola was only called in to replace the Chinese Grand Prix, which was canceled some point at the end of last year again. So, story of season for F1 this year is Red Bull versus Mercedes. Looks like Red Bull might have finally done it and got a little bit of a leg up on Mercedes. Now, you got to be a little bit cautious when you say that. We said the same thing about Ferrari in 2016, and then surely Ferrari started falling off towards the middle parts of the season. 2018 was sort of the same story, where Ferrari was a championship contender as well, and then sort of fell off around Hockenheim. But as it stands right now, it looks like Red Bull is actually the fastest car and fastest team in Formula One right now. So we're 2 races in. First race of the season at Bahrain, Lewis Hamilton scored a victory over Max Verstappen by the narrowest of margins. I mean, it was only a little bit under a second. Going into this weekend, practices, pretty important to see who's going to be where. And it looked like possibly Mercedes might have had the upper hand. Valtteri Bottas had the first 2 free practice sessions go in his favor. We get to qualifying, and Lewis Hamilton, sort of surprisingly to himself and his team, even put it on pole. It was actually the closest F1 qualifying session since 2012 across the top 8. Top 8 cars were separated by only just under 0.5 of a second, so just under half a second between the top 8. So it was Lewis Hamilton, Sergio Perez, and Max Verstappen were all under 0.1 of a second, which I think was quite the scene for Formula One qualifying. Usually in recent years, it's gone either the way of Mercedes or Ferrari, and on rare occasions, Red Bull being the fastest car in qualifying. But in this instance, it's pretty much anybody's game going into Q3. You didn't really know quite who was going to be on pole. Lando Norris as well set 2 purple sectors at the very end of Q3, and everybody's sitting here thinking, oh wait, were you actually going to have a McLaren driver on pole for the first time since 2013? And then unfortunately threw it away in the last sector, and also that lap didn't count because he went off track in turn 9. So we get to the race, raining at the start of the race, and it's pretty much Lewis versus Max right off the line. Max Verstappen gets an early advantage, actually pushes Lewis off track a little bit into turn 1. Lewis damages his rear wing a little bit. And that's pretty much where it stood for quite a while. The those two drivers were pretty close to each other for the majority of the first stages of the race. When we got to the middle of the race, Lewis Hamilton actually looked like he was starting to catch Verstappen. And I'm trying to remember, did Lewis pit I think Lewis pit first, I want to say, but I'm kind of losing it right now. I'm trying to remember.
I was in the hotel at
Yeah.
Alabama, and I was sleeping at the start. Actually, we had trouble finding the channel, and then we found it.
Which ESPN channel was it on?
It was just on normal ESPN,
Oh,
but like the
okay.
TV, it was on channel like 26, and if you just flip through the channels, because hotel TV, it went from like 19 to like 27. So we're like, oh, we don't have the channel. And then we tried just pressing in the numbers, and you had to press in like the .1, and then it just popped up, and it was so confusing. Red
Oh,
Roof
okay.
Inn, everyone. Red Roof Inn.
Very nice. Yeah, I can't actually remember enough to say confidently which one of those drivers pit first, but everybody pretty much started the race either on intermediates or wet tires, or a couple of drivers trying to try the wet tires. Didn't really work out too well. So the intermediates were definitely the tires to start the race on. Everybody for that first stop was just trying to make it to the point where the track was slick enough. So I think I want to say Max pit first for the slick tires, and then Lewis came in a lap later. Yes, that is what happened. I'm like 95% sure, because Lewis was actually setting some purple sectors on the lap where he had clean air. And so they both get onto slick tires. They're sort of carving their way through traffic. Race is pretty undramatic up to this point. And then Lewis ends up going into, I don't remember the turn number. I'd have to look. This is where I pull up a map real quick here, see if I can find what turn number it is. Oh boy. It would be turn number 7. Tassa, hope that's how it's pronounced. Goes off track passing the Williams of, I think it was the Williams. If I want to say it was Nicholas Latifi, I think it was a Williams. I don't know. I'm not really doing a great job here. But anyways, on the topic of Williams, right after Lewis goes off track, he went off track and just barely tapped the wall, but actually had some damage to his front wing, so he was going to have to pit, and he was going to be well outside of the top 10 at that point. Actually, it might have been George Russell that he was overtaking. And then one lap later, right as Lewis is coming into pit, or right before he comes into pit, George Russell ends up contacting Lewis's teammate Valtteri Bottas going into Tamburello, or the chicane right before it, and the two of them have a pretty sizable crash. I heard that the Mercedes chassis is a complete write-off, which in this season is a bigger deal than it usually would be because of the cost cap. Because now instead of spending that money developing parts, they're going to have to get a whole new car ready for Valtteri. So I'm not too sure how much that's going to play into the rest of the season, but definitely something to keep note of. I'm not too sure about the state of the Williams car from George Russell. I believe it might be a similar story for them. Just don't quote me on that. Kyle, had you seen the contact between the two of them? I assume you have at this point.
I have. I actually
Okay.
saw that one. I was actually in the shower, and I heard that there was a big crash.
So I guess my question to you is, do you put anybody at fault for that one, or is that one the clear definition of a racing incident?
No, it was a racing incident. Because you look at it, and everyone's saying that Russell went too far right. But then again, Valtteri did go defensive. So, I mean, both of them were just going for it. And they both moved to the right. So to say that if Russell would have just swept out there around Valtteri and Valtteri hadn't moved, it's just like, then yeah, that was Russell. But like when Valtteri also moves, it's just like, yeah, that I don't think either. I think both of them made that one happen.
It was actually something of note is that Russell was actually in the points at that point for Williams. I think that was for 8th or 9th place. Unfortunately, Valtteri had a disastrous race. Couldn't even find himself in the top 5 at all, I think, the entire race. So that was actually a battle for position. Unfortunately, one of the last times Russell was in the points for Williams was at Imola last year when he crashed on his own. So really, I think that that's a track that he's going to want to get out of his memory. I think Russell sort of owned up that it was his mistake, trying to pass on the outside. But looking at it as well, I also see what you're saying, where it's a racing incident. I mean, Valtteri did kind of come over. Was it a little bit too late for Russell to be trying to make a pass? Possibly. I could certainly see Valtteri's argument saying that he didn't expect him to be trying to pass it that late into the straightaway, that close to the turn. But yeah, to me, I think that that's just a racing incident as well. Taurus just commented 10th. Curious to know what that's in reference to. Oh, is it a battle for 10th? I think that's what he's trying to say.
Yes.
Anyway, so we go further on in the race. Max Verstappen pretty much now is unchallenged for the lead. The race was actually red flagged for that incident between George Russell and Bottas. Which F1 seems like they've been throwing a lot of red flags for those pretty big crashes recently. I hadn't seen a red flag in F1 before last year watching a race live. So
I think they had to for that one.
Yeah.
There was so much debris.
There was a lot of debris. I think also the integrity of the barriers was in question, but I don't think that ended up being a problem. Russell was in 10th, so yeah, it would have been a battle for 9th. Anyway, so get to the restart. Max Verstappen is challenged only by Lando Norris, who was on the soft tires at this point of the race. Everybody else pretty much around him, at least at the front of the field, was on the medium tire, including Max Verstappen. And then at that point, it basically just became Max versus Lewis on who could set the fastest lap of the race. Because obviously in F1, you get 1 point for setting the fastest lap of the race. At Bahrain, it was Bottas that got the fastest lap of the race. And considering that at this stage of the race, it was pretty clear that Lewis and Max were both going to have one win under their belt, the question on who the points lead goes to is down to that one fastest lap point. So it seemed like both of them were kind of just trying to take it away from each other. Ultimately, Lewis Hamilton got the help from DRS trying to carve his way through the top 10. And that's what gave him the slight advantage when it came to getting that fastest lap and the one championship point lead. So Max Verstappen won the race by 20 or so seconds, and Lewis Hamilton finished second, surprisingly. Now, a lot of people online were very quick to point out how lucky Lewis Hamilton got in that scenario where, he just hit the wall on his own pretty much, would have had to pit for a front wing replacement, was well outside the top 10, like I was saying at that point of the race, considering he was in the wall for probably, it felt like a good 20 seconds before he actually got back moving on track again. At that stage of the race, certainly I think a podium, maybe even a top 5 was out of the cards for him if it continued going green. But lo and behold, one lap after that, his teammate gets into a wreck with George Russell. The race is red flagged. He restarts. I can't remember where he restarted. It was just outside the top 10. And carved his way through the top 10 pretty easily with the help of DRS, which, by the way, DRS on the front straight at Imola that was strong. I think Lewis was just under 8/10ths back when he finally made the pass on Lando Norris towards the end of the race. But yeah, I mean, pretty much once he was in DRS range and within 8/10ths of a second, I'd say was the magic number for him, he was able to clean the pass before turn 1. Other drivers to note were obviously Lando Norris restarted second, and we kind of knew he wasn't going to be a challenger just because he was on the soft tire. Soft tire at that point was pretty worn. He had been on that one since he switched from the intermediates. So as they got towards the end of the race, I think everybody knew that he was going to fall off on pace a little bit. I was surprised actually to see him hold on for as long as he did. I didn't think that he'd be able to hold off Lewis as many laps as he was able to. But certainly a great podium finish for Lando Norris, second of his career after Austria last year. And, I think McLaren turned some heads this weekend, showing that, hey, potentially they could get a pole this season. Or they could even get a win this season if they really stick at it. Um,
I believe Lando's like third in points right now.
I You might be correct because I know it's not Bottas right now, and I would have to look. But see if you can get an answer for me on that one real quick.
I do. All I know is for sure is that Lewis and Max are 1 point separated in the championship right now, which is pretty fantastic.
Actually, I may be able to get a. I may
You're
be
the
able to
you're the
get.
guy with like F1 TV, aren't you? I mean, you
Well,
should
it
be able
doesn't
to
mean
do
I know
this.
who's third in points. Yes, it is Lando Norris third in
You
points
have
right
easy
now.
access to this, man. You pay for this.
third
I
third
don't.
in points right now, with Leclerc in fourth. Um, so the next race for Formula One will be the Portuguese Grand Prix on the weekend of May 2nd at Portimao. Second year for them going to that track as well. And then we have the Spanish Grand Prix and Monaco rounding out the end of May, but not on the same day as the Indy 500 this year. If Monaco ends up happening, which I hope it does, that would be this same weekend as Indy 500 qualifying this year. So, Kyle, you still wouldn't see it. Well, maybe you would. Depends what time you actually go to the track for
I try to
qualifying.
watch F1 before I leave. We actually end up how it goes when I usually am at IndyCar races and F1 races take place is we actually end up being late to the track because we wake up in the morning in the hotel and we just watch F1 and we try to leave, but we just end up looking at the TV for way too long. So yeah, yeah, it happens.
All right, I think that's all I have for Formula One. I don't know if you have
I
anything
just have
to add on to
I
that.
just have one question. I'm gonna
Sure.
ask you a question.
All right.
Hopefully, people like me who didn't watch the race have the same sort of questions. What happened to Perez? Why was he out of
Perez.
the
Um. Gosh,
Come
see,
on,
I'm
man.
mixing up. I'm mixing up Perez and Sainz, but I know Sainz kept making up. He kept making mistakes. Perez actually got penalized
Yeah, there were some penalties. That was gonna be my
for.
next question. Was penalties
What did he get penalized for though? I can't remember. Um.
because that's how that's how Alonso ended up in the points.
Yeah, I can't. Let's see. Oh, Perez got a penalty for overtaking behind the safety car. That's what it was.
Nice. And I know Kimmy got a penalty. I don't remember who
Kimmy
else.
got a penalty post race.
Yeah.
I'd have to see if I can figure out what that was for. It was a post race penalty for. Yeah, it was a 30-second post race penalty. Or for failing to enter the pit lane for the restart of the race after the red flag. Was what that was for. And I think that was it. But there could have been more. Oh, Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll also received a points penalty for. Was it for going off track? Yeah, he shortcutted the chicane. So these are all post race stuff that I hadn't actually paid attention to that much. But yeah, there were a couple of penalties both in the race and after it. Stone Davis says Gasly is actually in the second Red Bull, just painted to look like the AlphaTauri. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think Sergio Perez certainly showed that he has a lot of potential this weekend. I can certainly see him getting some race wins in that car this season. I'd be quite frankly disappointed if he didn't. Obviously, Bahrain was a pretty disastrous first race for him at Red Bull, and this race he showed a lot of pace and promise from qualifying and practice, but unfortunately in the race just made a couple of mistakes that cost him. But I certainly hope that we can see him pulling off some wins this season, especially if Red Bull maintains being the top team that they are right now. Now, Kyle, since you threw me a question, I'm going to throw you one as well. Do you think Mercedes is going to overtake Red Bull as the dominant car on the grid this season at some point, or do you think Red Bull is going to hold that advantage throughout the whole season?
I think Red Bull should hold the advantage. Um, I mean, Mercedes, I mean, definitely with the way things are, um, how development is a little, slowed down, I would imagine, and especially with Mercedes, like you said, with the cost cap and how it hurts them a little bit. I think Red Bull's definitely in a better position, but I definitely wouldn't count out Mercedes from overtaking the spot as or being or wouldn't count them out from just at some point becoming the clear best car on the grid. Because right now, I think either are pretty matched, and it's pretty great to watch.
All right, I think that's going to wrap that F1 discussion up. Just on to a couple of news stories here. One that I have, and this is turning into a little bit of a boy who cried wolf story, is Glickenhaus is officially not running the season opener at Spa for the World Endurance Championship. And as I said, that's a bit of a boy who cried wolf situation. We had heard, let's see if I can remember from the beginning. Originally, was Spa supposed to be the season opener initially, and then they moved it to Portimao, and then Glickenhaus said we can. No, I think Portimao was supposed to be the season opener, and they said okay, we can't race Portimao. We're not gonna have the car ready in time. And then they moved Portimao back, I think, and then Spa became the season opener. And they said, oh, actually, we're going to have time to race Spa now, so we can do that. We can race the entire season. And then now they're flipping on that decision, saying we're not going to be able to race at Spa, but hopefully we'll be able to race at Portimao. And not only are they not racing at the season opener at Spa, but James Glickenhaus has gone on the record of saying that he doesn't plan on contesting any of the races, as of right now, doesn't plan on contesting any of the races after Le Mans. So if you look at this season's schedule, we have Portimao, we have Spa, we have Portimao, we have Monza, and then we have Le Mans, Fuji, and Bahrain. So you're looking at a potential of 2-3 races, depending on how everything goes on the front of them competing in Monza. I haven't really heard anything on that front yet. But then saying that they don't want to race in Fuji or Bahrain because they don't see themselves having a market at those two or in those two countries right now. Now, to me, is there reason to be concerned at anything he's saying? I think there is a little bit, because we've heard similar stories before. In fact, one of the videos that I'm posting tomorrow, actually, so stay tuned if you want to see this video, is about an Aston Martin LMP1 project that sort of was in the same situation where we got delivered some empty promises. And then you need to look back to 2015 as well with Nissan, who were saying, oh, we're not going to be able to make the first race of the season. We just have to get our car past FIA safety regulations. We have to go through the crash test. And then they get to Le Mans, the car's a disappointment, and we never hear from it again. Now, do I think Glickenhaus is going to be the same situation? No, but certainly it's a little bit concerning when you start delivering some empty promises, or you start backpedaling on what you had said your plans were before. It certainly takes away from the degree of confidence that we could have expected from Glickenhaus to have. I think one of the things I've said about the team before is, for such a small team, they deliver a lot of confidence, and the more statements they make like this, and the more races they end up pulling out of, I think that pulls a significant amount of confidence out from their overall allotment. I'm hoping to see them race in those races beyond Le Mans. I'd love to see them actually be a full-time contender in the World Endurance Championship. But to me, it looks like they're actually one of those teams who's focused primarily on Le Mans, obviously, but then doesn't care quite as much about the overall World Endurance Championship. So hopefully, like I said, we'll see a little bit of a reversal on those decisions, but as of right now, they are not on the entry list for Spa, which means they are absolutely not contesting the opening race of the season, and therefore won't be title contenders this year. Another story that I saw that I wanted to talk about a couple of days ago, 4 or 5 days ago, Sports Car 365 and John Daggy's posted a story that that GM's decision on LMDH and GTD Pro will be coming within the next 45 days. So that puts us right around the end of May on when we can expect a decision for that. Kyle, you and I have voiced concerns before about what we see GM doing for the future. They've been pretty quiet. I think that they were sort of a surefire manufacturer. We were expecting to see an LMDH, and then everything kind of became a little bit questionable after the whole Corvette GTD Pro deal came out. And obviously, we've also talked about Corvette and GTD Pro, and if we're actually going to see them in that class next year in IMSA, and if so, what type of car they're going to be running. Now, another story that I'd seen this week was from Racer.com. I want to say it was posted by Marshall Pruitt, but I could be wrong, so I don't want to say that with full confidence, that Corvette is... it looks like Corvette is going to be modifying their current GTE car to fit the GTD Pro regulations. Similar, or sort of the reverse of what BMW had done back in the day with the M6 and the Z4, which were primarily GT3 cars that were converted over to GTE spec. Now, that would sort of be an ideal situation, I think, because that would hopefully allow them to run at Le Mans and allow them to run in the GTD Pro class with minimal modifications. But that is sort of an ever-changing story that we have to keep our eyes on. Kyle, do you have anything to add? I know I've been talking there for quite a bit, and my mouth is pretty dry from that as a result. So if you have anything to add on to that, I'm open ears.
I mean, not really. I'm just surprised that we haven't had an announcement already, but I mean that's pretty much along the lines of what we've already said on the show.
Well, see, the thing that I find interesting is the more we hear about the Corvette GTD Pro story, the more it sounds like they were actually blindsided by that decision.
Which is questionable on IMSA's part.
Right. I mean, if you had told Corvette, GM, Pratt, and Miller beforehand, I'm sure that they would have said, okay, well, here's the deal. We're not going to be able to do this, but we're not going to be able to make a fully fledged GT3 car and program, but we can make a car that's a GTE car that is converted over, and then IMSA can say, okay, that's all right. We're going to allow a waiver for that if the other manufacturers are okay with it. But that's not what we're hearing right now. What we're hearing is GM and Corvette kind of saying, all right, well, this is what we plan on doing, but it doesn't sound like there's been plans on that for, months in the making at this point. So I'm certainly kind of shocked by that. If it was a complete blindside decision for them, I think, as we've said before, there's one manufacturer you don't want to lose in IMSA. It's Corvette more than anybody else. You can lose a handful of manufacturers before you want to lose Corvette, just based on how many fans they bring to the track. So I'm certainly hoping that we can see the best of both worlds for them next year, which would, as I said, probably be a converted GTD Pro car. I don't want to see them out of IMSA, and I also don't want to see them out of racing the 24 Hours of Le Mans. I think that they're a very strong team to race in both of those series. So 45 days was the number. It's looking around probably 40-ish days now. So like I said, end of May, we should be able to confidently report on what their plans are going forward. So I'll just go out on the record right now and say that I hope that we can see an LMDH program and a converted GTD Pro car from them. I think that having two different manufacturers under the GM name in two different classes certainly brings in a wide variety of fans, and it makes the series and the classes overall more healthy than they would have been otherwise. So I think that's going to be enough to wrap this up, unless you have any tidbits of news that I had missed.
I mean, Sage Karam and Ryan Reinbold confirmed their deal, which is an expected announcement, but that's just one less driver out of the running for the sixth Andretti seat for the month of May. They actually unveiled some sponsors. Not quite sure what there was I saw the 500 Festival in the car, and I know it's an Indiana sponsor, but yeah, Karam's now off the list of drivers for that sixth Andretti seat, which is interesting.
It's AES Indiana is the sponsor that signed on for him. So
It's not Wix, which is interesting.
Is Wix
Usually
even a
Brian
contingency
Reinbold's
on
been
that or no?
no.
Oh,
I mean, Make 'em Auctions is,
oh
which
no,
is
no.
smaller.
Wix is a contingency on their car.
Is it?
Yep, it's on the tire, rear tire, uh, whatever they call it.
Well, that's good.
Not
All
tire
right.
guard, but the other thing, tire ramp. Yeah, so there you go. That's the only thing I had seemed to have missed. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more IndyCar news in the coming episodes. The month of May is coming up in a little bit under 2 weeks now, so stay tuned because we're going to have a whole month of action, both trackside, not on my part, but on Kyle's part, and just traditional standard news episodes from our own respective places. Anyway, for this episode, that's going to wrap it up. I'm going to try to get the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts version out tomorrow. I've been a little bit lazy on that in past episodes. Haven't gotten it quite out on time. I think last week was like Friday until I got it out. Granted, we recorded that episode on
Great production here.
Tuesday or something. I don't know. But yes, check for that to be out tomorrow. I'm not going to get lazy this time at least. And then if you are on my YouTube channel, you can check out a video that I am posting tomorrow about the worst LMP1 car of all time. Hope to catch you on that one. I'm going to do a premiere. Not quite sure what time. I have to finish editing that video, so I'm going to get right to that after this episode. If you want to join us, I don't know why I'm saying this on this one, but I guess for the pre-recorded version, if you want to catch us for the live podcast next time, you can check out my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/c/gtrain. Anyway, for this episode, thank you all so much for tuning in. Hope to catch you next week at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern now, for another episode of the Rain Race Podcast. Take care.